Alright, let's talk a little bit about sanding. Sanding wood, sanding metal, sanding aluminum. And that's what I'm going to focus on, is aluminum, because this will be of some interest to people that are refinishing an aluminum boat. Whether it's an old relic, a classic that you're trying to bring back to its original beauty, or a working boat. By working, I mean that you're going to fish or hunt out of or use regularly and just want it to look reasonable. We're going to run through some of the options, and I've explored every one of these. They all work to some degree under some circumstances, so there's no one silver bullet that's going to work for everything. Sometimes it'll take all these, and sometimes only a couple. But this will show you somewhat less expensive options. I don't have air tools. Those are usually a little more expensive. You have to have a big compressor, which is an expense. But most everybody has electricity and or elbow grease. And that's what we're going to focus on today. I'm not an automobile refinisher, a boat professional. I've just dealt with it for years because it's a hobby. And I've learned the hard way, I guess, what doesn't work and what does. And some of these will help you, some won't. We've got a relatively expensive, $100 or more probably, 5-inch random orbit sander. Now it has hook and loop on the pad, and then these discs have the companion surface, and they just stick right to it. Most of these tools have this, and it's ready to go. They remove a lot of material in a hurry. You got to have a relatively large flat surface, so they're not for every application. They'll work on the flat parts of the boat, but on the curved parts you may need something a little different. Another option, and I can't even tell you where to find these, you'll just have to probably do an internet search or something. These go in a drill, and they're little soft sanding pads. Again, hook and loop. You get the disc, it's got the companion stuff on it, and it just sticks on there. Put it in your drill and you're ready to sand. They do a great job too. Of course, you have sanding sponges. Come in sizes and shapes and different grits. They make it kind of labor intensive, a lot of work. You have good old sanding block that you just use sandpaper on. And then these are nylon, I suppose. They're not wire brushes. They're nylon brushes with grit on each little strand. And this one's a finer one, this one's a coarser one. It just depends on what you're doing, how you're doing it, what works. It takes some experimentation. This little jewel is a 3M Scotch-Brite pad, I guess. Yes, it says so. And I'm using Scotch-Brite in a generic sense. This is called a roll lock fitting. It'll cost you about $30 to get set up on this deal, because you got to buy the roll lock fitting and then a couple of these. It also removes paint and does a relatively good job in certain places. Now we have wire brushes, but they're fine wire brushes. If you use a coarse wire brush, you're going to start removing aluminum fairly easy, and we want to leave the aluminum on the project, not remove it. We just want to remove the paint to prep it. And over here we have these flap discs that go in a drill, and they're just flaps of sandpaper, and they'll conform to some surfaces depending. Now this one's well used, but it still works. I mean, I'll use it till there's nothing left virtually. Then we're going to move on to a couple of electric tools, and that's a little detail sander I'm sure everyone recognizes. It's got the hook and loop fastening system. You can get multiple grits of paper for it. It works in moderately small places. Now it's got an attachment that will get into really tiny places, but it's almost too small for some things. I'm sure that you could use it in tiny little crevices and crooks and crannies, but it works well with that size pad on it. And if you're going to start getting into smaller, you need one of these high-speed oscillating tools. They also have the hook and loop fastening system in multiple grits, just like all the rest I've shown you. You can use any or all, and you may have to. In fact, I own these because I've had to buy them to use on projects, aluminum boat projects. If you strip a boat down to bare metal and get the right primer on it, your paint's going to come out nice. You'll have a project you can be proud of. Just need to be careful and get clean around your rivets, and that's where the brushes help a lot. And I'd say on an aluminum boat you don't want to use anything coarser than 100 grit. And sandpaper goes coarse the smaller numbers. In other words, 50 grit is much coarser than 100 grit. 40 grit is coarser than 50. So your finer numbers are your higher numbers. I'd say with an aluminum boat you want to stay in the 100 to 150 grit, which is typically 100 grit, 120, 150 is the way I normally find it. Now with your little detail sanders, you can go really fine. With the bigger sander, it's harder to find the super fine grits. But you know, if you're doing a project, you're likely going to have a drill. You're likely going to have some sort of sander. But if not, that's the big one's the more expensive. Then this little guy on the end, left end here, is not very expensive at all. And then the high-speed oscillating tool is probably middle of the row. You can spend what you want on a lot of these tools. You know, it may be $100 for the big one, $80 for the high speed, and $39.95 for the smaller one. But you can spend upward from there depending on what quality of tool you want. Now, I can't afford the Maximum, the Fine, F-E-I-N brand or anything. Those are German made and they're relatively expensive. But all these tools will help you in your quest for sanding, cleaning, and preparing a surface for painting. Thank you.